A couple of weeks ago, the lifting mechanism of my MLT 100N table saw ceased to raise and lower, and it turns out that this particular lifting screw here, which is a left-hand screw, I hope you can make that out, is not turning. It's turning, but it's not lifting, and the reason for it is that the thread has stripped inside this alloy casing, which is called the gearbox. I have ordered another one which I've received, and I'm going to go into the process of replacing it. This is the replacement gearbox, and I have to take, once I get the other one out of the machine, I have to take the actual gear assembly out of this, the old one, and place it into this one. I don't know how easy that's going to be, because I bet there's a bearing in there and there'll be a very snug fit. The problem, of course, is this alloy threaded part here is stripped in the original gearbox, and that's the whole reason for replacing this. In order to remove this original gearbox, we have 4 screws here down at the bottom of each of these 2 rails, which allow the thing to slide up and down, and there are probably another couple of screws somewhere else too. Anyway, I'll undo these 4 and see if I can get this out. As I raise the carriage up, there are another 2 screws in here which hold the drive mechanism, which is these, like a differential in a car. So we'll get those screws out. Of course, those screws down here are actually Allen screws, so I'll use an Allen key and have to get those 2 out. Now I've removed the 2 bars that were in here and slot into these 2 locations, and you can see that there is the upward, or the left-handed threaded screw, and that is the what would you say, a collar, I guess, brace, where the 2 Allen screws came out of, which is down in this section here from the back. So I now have to remove the actual electric motor from the casing, the gearbox casing, and I have actually done this before, and in doing so I decided I was going to replace the brushes. It can be a bit magnetic, so I'll just try and get the whole thing out and leave the motor in situ, because I don't want to take everything out. It seems unnecessary to have to do it that way, to take the whole motor out. So I'll undo those 4 screws and we'll get that whole casing. Okay, I've removed the casing from here, and you can see that there is a little bearing. I did have this, as I said, I had this off before, and I've changed the carbon brushes in the other end of it as well, put a new set in. And over here is the actual casing I just took off. So now I have to remove this, which is the actual gearbox on which the blade rotates. That may be a little bit of an issue, so I'm going to see how easy it is. I will be back with you shortly. I've done the 3 screws, and they're relatively easier, but before I lift this off, I'm reorienting everything so to make sure it all goes back exactly the same way. And I do realise that this has to come off as well. There are 2 Allen screws at the back here. This is for the riving knife mounting, and that will go on this one over here. Wish me luck. Well, I've just done a little test fit, and that was relatively easy. So this is the actual mechanism here. I can see that there's a circlip on the end of that, so it's holding it all together. What I am going to do is pack this with grease. This old one has grease in there. I've got some bearing grease to my left, red stuff, and I'm going to put that in, and then I will reassemble the whole lot. Okay, well, I've packed that with grease, and now I'll put that back on, and I'll take the riving knife part off and fit that back on as well. And then we can put the thing back into the machine itself. Okay, well, I've put that back in, and the grease is a bit thicker than the other stuff, but that'll come out. That'll, as it heats up, the viscosity will drop down. Now, you've got to be very careful here because these are steel screws going in again to the an alloy housing, so not too much torque on them. The other thing is, of course, that when it goes back into there, the blade will be holding everything together anyway, but just basically hand tight. Of course, the important thing is to get this left-hand threaded unit out, which is the problem. It's not the problem, that's the problem. And re-thread it back into that housing before I do much else. So I'll do that and get it back out. See, I'm doing it the wrong way. I'm going to take the riving knife off here, and of course manufacturers love to make things difficult. Here we have two Allen keys, Allen screws, and a Torx. So you need to have a full toolkit to do any of these repairs, and I guess that's one of the reasons that these manufacturers want you to send the things back and charge you an arm and a leg to repair something that shouldn't fail in the first place. And having said that, this is still quite wobbly. I mean, once I tighten it up in the machine itself, but that just shows you that there's a hell of a lot of slap in that, and that's just asking for trouble down the track. Okay, I have the new one reassembled. That's only on virtually finger tight because that will have to have some adjustment when I put the riving knife and square it all up again. But the next thing that happens is we now have to put it into or back onto the motor, which I will do because I can't hold this GoPro and do it at the same time. Okay, that was relatively easy. Now I will replace the 4 screws into the body of the motor and tighten them up, and then we can reassemble it back into its frame. Okay, the next thing is I have to fit these bars into their respective holes, locating holes, but you'll notice that there is a flat on each of the bars, and the flat must go that way so that it locates. It makes it easier to locate on the casting, I don't know what you would call that. Anyway, that's what it is. And I'm fiddling around here. That'll just make those screws easier to locate. So I'll do that. Okay, well that main assembly is now in, and we can actually see that everything is meshing together and it's raising and lowering as it should. I'm not too happy with this assembly in here. This is rubbish. It's just nylon and there's a little bit of slap in there. You can't get rid of it. I'll pack it with grease anyway to make it easier, but it just shows you how cheaply made these things are and the prices that they ask. Anyway, just a personal opinion. Right, well the whole assembly is back together. I've tested it. It's very smooth now, coming up and down with a bit of lubrication. I've given it a damn good clean. We'll have it a bit of a test. Yep, everything works fine. Now it's just putting all the ancillary stuff back. Okay, well that's the repair done. We've got it all back together again, and as we can see, very smooth. We'll wind it back up again. And there we go. Beautiful. And now I have an El Cheapo Ryobi one as well. Crikey, what am I going to do with 2? Well, I hope that video was informative to all of you M100, MLT100N owners. Just the simple little thing like a stripped thread can create all sorts of problems, but it just shows you that if you locate that part from Makita, you can do the job yourself relatively easily if you do it step by step. So I hope that was informative, and I'll see you next time.